You know, it does not really bring me any joy to sit down right now with you guys and say that I think Oz Perkins might have lost his fastball. And furthermore, it almost begs the question, did he ever have it really to begin with? So I just got back home from seeing Keeper, and it's a movie that I've been pretty excited for. It looked more serious tonally with something like Longlegs. It looked a little bit more sinister, as opposed to The Monkey, which came out earlier this year, which was more going for sort of a horror comedy vibe, which, you know, I thought it was cool that Perkins kind of took a swing at something like that, but it didn't really work for me. I didn't really find The Monkey to be all that memorable or really all that good, which was disappointing coming off of Longlegs, which I really did enjoy. So, having seen the very first trailer for Keeper, I was looking forward to it. It looked a little bit more my speed. It looked a little bit more like an actual horror film. So, like I said, it brings me no pleasure to say that I was definitely disappointed by this movie. And it really has had me thinking, you know, how do I actually feel about Perkins and his body of work and the rate at which he's been pumping stuff out? You know, it kind of has had me reconsidering some things. I first was exposed to Perkins with The Blackcoat's Daughter, if I'm not mistaken, which is a movie that I really like. It might be my favorite Perkins movie. It's pretty much right up there with Longlegs at this point. And I haven't seen Gretel and Hansel or The Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. You know, maybe I should actually go out and seek those out to kind of get the full spectrum of Perkins. Because maybe had I seen those prior to Keeper, I wouldn't really be having this kind of come to Jesus moment where I'm like, maybe Perkins isn't, you know, maybe he doesn't have the sauce that I thought he had. So let's actually get into Keeper itself. I'll try to keep this pretty spoiler-free, but I'll probably get more into specifics towards the end, if at all. But yeah, this movie was like really weird and like very unpredictably so. It was one of those situations where I'm watching the movie and, you know, early on into the runtime, I'm starting to think, ooh, I don't know if I like this. And I always have to try to kind of fight those thoughts for the time being, because I don't want to be going into something not open-minded, right? I want to make sure that I'm being as open-minded as possible. So I'm like sitting there and I'm like, okay, just kind of wait and see where the movie's going, see what it's trying to do, and then maybe this will all have been worth it. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that it was. So what do I mean by this? Okay, so basically the movie is just kind of throwing a lot of really weird visuals at you throughout the film's runtime. And typically that's not something that I would dislike, but it sort of starts to snowball to a point where you're like, okay, like this is kind of weird. Maybe I'm into it, maybe I'm not, and it's all going to depend on how you kind of tie this together and explain these visuals and why we are seeing them. And Keeper does not really do that, in my opinion. So I'll try to, you know, maybe talk a bit more about that towards the end, but, you know, as far as the structure and everything and the plot, it's not really working for me in terms of like the relationship between our two main characters. And weird things are happening to the girl, and the movie does that really annoying thing where the guy is like, she's like explaining everything to the guy, and the guy's like, just calm down, like I'm sure everything's fine. And it's like he doesn't believe her, and he's like expressing all that doubt, and she's like very clearly you know, scared of something. And so in any normal situation, the guy would be like, okay, like I got you, like let's get you out of here. And he never does that, and it just kind of happens a couple times, and it starts to become like a really big red flag, and like annoyingly so, to where it made me not like the main girl so much, because she keeps making these stupid decisions and not reacting in a way that would be conducive with like how a normal person would react. So it just kind of creates this like cognitive dissonance between me and the film and like the characters. And I'm supposed to kind of care about the characters, you know, like that's sort of the goal with a film. especially like a horror film. Like you're trying to get me to empathize with this girl and like want to see her kind of, you know, live, survive the situation, the circumstances. And I couldn't really get there because I just kept being annoyed by the fact that she just wasn't really behaving like in a believable way. And you know, I'm all for like low budget horror movies, and you know, I don't know the exact budget, but like just based on the type of movie that this is, which is like a one location kind of deal, I typically tend to associate those with like lower budget horror films. And you know, I think the real challenge of those kinds of movies is to make that same location very engaging for the audience and shoot it in a way that sort of makes it feel, you know, distinct and everything. And the movie is shot well, you know, looks pretty and everything. But I think the location is just very bland. It's just basically a big sort of modern cabin in the woods. And so you've got, you know, some foliage, you've got, you know, a stream, a babbling brook, if you will, and the house, which is, you know, it's like a contemporary sort of cabin. It's just nothing very visually distinct about it. And it does get quite boring after a while being in this place. And, you know, a lot of the interesting visuals come from the scares. And there is some truly unsettling imagery towards the end of the movie. And it's not really explained why this imagery is kind of presented in this way. We do get a big exposition dump at a certain point, but like there's not really, it's kind of like these designs are just built around looking creepy and kind of reverse engineered into a story is kind of the way it comes across. There's kind of a separation for me in terms of like, okay, I understand what these entities are or used to be, but the way that they look doesn't really lend itself to that. So it was just kind of weird. The whole thing just really did not work for me. This movie does not work for me, almost at all. Tatiana Maslany's performance here, I think she was also in The Monkey. She doesn't really behave like a normal person, and I guess that's sort of linked into the plot a little bit as well, just based on what we find out about her towards the end, which is all pretty ambiguous, by the way. It's a lot of things that are sort of implied but never outright stated, which, if you know me or my channel, I'm into that. I like that method of storytelling, just sort of ambiguity and allowing the audience to sort of map on their own assessment of what happened to the movie. And it's kind of makes it interesting and kind of, you'll get a lot of interesting takes on things when you make movies like that. Like it's why Blair Witch has so many different fan theories and stuff like that. But people are not going to be coming up with fan theories about Keeper. That's for sure. There's not really much of anything to sort of latch onto here. The movie has quite a few jump scares. A few of them got me. Some of them are kind of well done, others not so much. They're mostly kind of obnoxious, I think. The kind that are, you know, associated with a loud noise. In this case, it's like a lot of screams and stuff. And, you know, while that is unsettling to listen to women scream very loudly, it's not really, it kind of loses its impact the fourth or fifth time that you do it. But yeah, and so that kind of leads me to a conversation about Perkins and his like work output just as a whole. Since Longlegs, he's just been working. I think he's even got a new project already filmed. Not sure. I forget what it's called. Oh, they're doing like they've been announcing cast members. I think they just announced that Nicole Kidman is going to be in the next one. So that's pretty cool. Like she's a pretty big star, right? I think. So it begs the question, like, is it almost better when a filmmaker doesn't release a movie every year? In this instance, 2 movies a year. I don't know if, you know, time will tell if Perkins is going to maintain that level of output. I hope not. You know, it's definitely not a situation like with Mike Flanagan where you're like, for me anyway, I'm always excited to see what he does. But it's gotten to a point now where Perkins is kind of 0 for 2 this year. And, you know, the goodwill of Blackcoat's Daughter and Longlegs you know, is going to start to wear off if things continue to trend in this direction. And, you know, listen, I'm not saying that the guy is bad by any means. Obviously, like I said, I like Blackcoat's Daughter. I really like Longlegs. And listen, I know Longlegs was not like universally loved or anything, but like for me, coming out of Longlegs, I was ready to declare him like up there with Robert Eggers and Flanagan, you know, and guys like that, Ari Aster maybe. And the follow-ups have just not really been there. So maybe this is just a me thing. I don't really know what the zeitgeist, what the community is feeling about Oz Perkins, especially with this movie having just come out. I guess the discourse around this will tell the tale. Yeah, I guess it's just a little disappointing. Makes me kind of reevaluate Oz Perkins as a filmmaker. I think it's cool that he's been making a lot of movies, but it's like, is it almost better for a filmmaker to like sit with a property or a project for like multiple years so he can really just finally craft it? You know, it's like the quick turnarounds here with Perkins have, you know, it's got me wondering how to feel, because it's like he's making a lot of movies and the guy's working and he's getting to tell stories, and I like, that's cool. Like, I'm sure that he does that. He's doing that because he enjoys it. But I also think there's something to be said for like really just taking your time with a thing. And like the one location aspect of this movie and the fact that, you know, he had this and Monkey in the same year just kind of makes me think that he's kind of just churning stuff out in a way. And yeah, I don't know. It just, this and the Monkey didn't seem to me to have the same level of care and craftsmanship that Longlegs did. And so it's like, I just want him to kind of chill for a sec and and I don't know, just really apply that craftsmanship that I know that he can craft. So anyway, this has been a bit of a rant. Let me know if you guys are feeling the same way. I'm kind of curious, like I said. Chime in. Let me know what you thought of Keeper. Let me know what you think of Oz Perkins in general. Should I go seek out Gretel and Hansel? I heard that's a pretty cool movie. I don't really know much about it. That or The Pretty Thing That Lives in the House was like a Netflix thing. People don't really talk about that one. That one might just be outright bad. No idea. So let me know what you think. I would love to hear you guys' feedback on this. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't. We talk about new movies, old movies, physical media, and horror in general. So with all that being said, guys, please take care and watch more movies.